Alright guys, welcome back. This is going to be part 4, I believe, of this one drawing series. Like I said in the last video, I said that I would start talking a little bit about critique. I'd also like to reflect a little bit on negative feedback, and I guess like positive and negative feedback on your artwork, and dealing with that and what to do with that. And the, kind of emotional aspect of going through that as an experience. To start, I think I'm going to kind of talk about the pros and cons of critique, and a little bit about my experience as someone who attended an art school, and what critique was like in art school, because it's a very unique thing. Every department seemed to have critique as a part of their curriculum, in my department included, and it was a unique experience across all departments, I think. For instance, the painting department was notorious for having very strict, very cutthroat critiques, or they seemed very intense. And, they spent a very long time in their critiques, and it would be like a whole day thing for just like a handful of students, because it was a small college. It was relatively, like 300 to 500 students, I believe, no more. And so each class was pretty intimate, but some of these critiques would take like an entire block of 3 hours to do. And that's pretty intense. Not that the illustration department didn't also have those 3-hour critiques, but one thing that I noticed when I was doing my thing in college, in that illustration department, and doing those critiques, the illustration department was pretty friendly with each other, and at least our year. So it was split up into, obviously, we had the group of people who were like a year ahead of us. I had a lot of friends in that group. We had a year behind us. I wasn't as close to that group. And I just noticed that each year of people were very different, obviously, from each other. The year ahead of us had, I think, more strict, or not even really strict, but had more intense, opinionated personalities, and there was a little bit of clashing of personalities going on in that group, way more so than in our group. So we didn't really ever have very heated critiques on our artwork. And basically, if you don't know what a critique is in art school or university, a critique is usually you have had an assignment due, and the day it was due, there would be a big critique day, or critique class. And basically what would happen is, in some order, usually the order of which people hung their work on the wall, so just kind of in like a clockwise or counterclockwise or whatever, around the room, we would just hang what we had done on the wall, what we were assigned to have done. I'll get into assignments in illustration departments maybe later in this video, maybe in another. But the critique was, each person would be kind of on the spot, in the spotlight, and the whole class would gather around, and we would critically analyze what the student had done, the piece of work that the student had done. I'm sorry if you hear a little bit of movement. My dog's sitting in the chair behind me, and she keeps rotating around in a circle and won't lay down. So anyway, in the critique, each person would be critically analyzed based on so many different things, based on, the overall craft. Did they do a good job? Did they use their materials correctly? Did they use them incorrectly? Did they follow what the assignment was asking of them? Because as illustrators, and unfortunately I didn't learn this or I knew it, but it hadn't dawned on me, that illustrators do work for other people, and that's what makes them, like a freelance illustrator, is you do work for other people, and you get paid for that work. And it's not that I didn't know this, it's just, I guess, what I had been looking for. I'm going to go on a tangent just for a second off of the critique subject and on to more personal things for just a minute. Back when I started college, illustration, was the closest thing to what I was doing, I believe. Like, when you look at my work, you think, oh, this person's an illustrator, this person likes illustrative work. My work does work as illustration. But the college that I went to, and this might be true, and it might not be true in other colleges, but in my college, they focused a lot on doing freelance work. I gotta stop, not drawing while I'm talking. Freelance work is in, illustrating children's books, illustrating editorials, illustrating, I know people still do it, but, come on. It's a little bit dated, just a little bit dated. So illustrations that people are purchasing to go along with something pre-existing, like a book or whatever. And they really focused on that, and they should, because if you're going to college, you're obviously doing it because you want a career and you want to make money doing that career. But what I noticed just in my attending college and going through all that, I really didn't like it. I really didn't like doing work for other people in that way. I'll get into the difference between freelance illustration work and doing commissions, which, in its own way is doing work for other people, but it's a little bit different, and I'll explain why later. But anyway, so, God, I wish I could remember, why I went on this tangent to begin with, because I was talking about critique, and now I'm talking about my own personal life. Anyway, so I realized that I didn't really like doing that kind of illustration, the sort of illustration that they were asking for, which is assignment based. So someone would say alright, in class today, or for this assignment, you guys are going to have to do an editorial illustration, and you'll have to find an editorial article, something from a journal, or a online piece or something, online article, and just make an illustration for it. And okay, you have a week or two, depending, to do that piece, and that would pretty much just be on your own time, however you wanted to do that, or maybe there was a restriction on medium or something, and then you would have to do that. So, come critique day, you would be, expected to have something to show. Sometimes people didn't, and that was kind of a shit show. Or, all of our professors were relatively kind. But if you don't have your homework done in college, it's kind of frowned upon, obviously. So yeah, you'd come in, you'd have your work, you'd put it on the wall. The critique would begin with whoever was, the first person. And basically what would happen is everyone would gather around, they'd pull up a chair, and have a good look at what you've done, and then they would start offering feedback. And for me personally, I'm going to speak from my experience for right now. I usually had generally positive feedback, And that can sound, that's good, but it can also be really frustrating because in college, you're not there to repeatedly have your back packed, packed? Your back. You're not there to have your back patted repeatedly, is what I mean to say. You're there to learn, and you're there to have people say, you know what, this is not as strong as it should be, or this part isn't reading the way I think you wanted it to, or just think, there are good ways of critiquing and bad ways. And I think our people, our group, the people who all graduated at the same time from our department, were all pretty close to each other by the end of it. Or at least we were all friendly with each other enough that we had a very hard time being overly critical of each other, because we knew, oh, this person struggles with hands, let's not be too mean to them about how their hand looks a little off, or, this person's been having a hard week, so let's just give them an easy time of it so that they don't get upset. Or, when you get close to people and you're with them every day for 4 years, some odd, you get to a point where, you know the person and you know why maybe they're struggling with that certain thing. You don't bring it up. I think our class was smaller than the class ahead of us, so we were a little bit more intimate across the entire class, and that might have been the reason why our critiques were usually on the softer side. That being said, some critiques, whether it was a critique in another class where you're with other people from other departments, those might have been a little bit more stressful, because you're not going to have your friends all sitting around you going, oh, great job, it was always just kind of like a, yay, we did it again, it's assignment day, let's just hang out and chat about how good we all did. Which, the professors always really want you to be critical with each other. It was just hard for us because of the reasons I listed. But anyway, so sometimes you'd get into a critique, and sometimes they would be heated. I had a couple bad critiques, and they made me feel like shit, straight up. There's no way around it, you're being critiqued, and sometimes you're just in an emotional place, and it makes you feel bad. And I think 2 of them, I cried about it, but, college is a very highly emotional place, I think, for everyone, so it was kind of expected. And I don't know if you guys are artists, if you're an artist and you're watching this and you've had negative feedback, or if you've had, if you've ever been a part of a critique that just kind of went sour, you know what I'm talking about. It doesn't feel good sometimes. And the critiques that went bad for me, I felt like it was a little bit unfounded, or, not to sound conceited, but it wasn't really bad work. I don't think it deserved what it got. But sometimes you get a group of people that are feeling kind of sassy, and they nitpick a little bit. That being said, looking back, I really do see what they were saying. So I'm not going to say, oh, they just, picked on me and, picked apart my artwork and it made me feel bad. I see where they were coming from, but it was a rarity for me. It was kind of whoa, wait, what, why? What did I... Normally this doesn't happen, and I feel like these are decent pieces, what is happening? But yeah, that being said, critique is rough, and especially putting your artwork out there on the internet. I was always kind of afraid of critiques happening online, and that just isn't something that's happened for me yet. I haven't ever had someone contact me and be like, this isn't great, or I don't know, negativity online comes in strange packages, I think. but it hasn't really happened to me yet. Not that it won't, and I'm sure now that I'm on YouTube, I'll get negative responses at some point down the road. And that's something that you're just going to have to live with, that I'm just going to have to live with. That's just human nature. But it always kind of still hurts. So when you're in that bad critique and people are, telling you that you've got a tangent, or that they don't quite understand what you're going for, or if you just miss the mark and people point it out, take that as a growing moment in your life. Take that as a blessing, because it can be hard to never be critiqued either. Because then you don't really have direction. It's just constant, like, oh, good job yet again, keep up the good work. And then I feel like you can stagnate a little bit if people are always treating you that way. If you just so happen to be the one in the class that constantly just gets a pat on the back, and you're like, yep, do that again next time and you'll be good. Because you can always improve. Like, no matter who you are, you can always get better. And it's good to have a direction to be pushed into. That being said, usually there was always something that a professor, at least, if the class didn't have anything to say other than positive things, a teacher would always be able to pipe in and say, you're doing good, and this is really strong, but maybe push the shadows here a little darker, or this arm's position's a little bit off, and stuff like that, and maybe rework that a little bit. And that's really helpful. It's really a good thing to be told. You gotta grow a thicker skin, you just, sometimes you can be in a really sensitive mood and take it as an attack. And sometimes as someone who's critiquing, you can be an asshole about it. Don't do that. Like, there's no need. Even if you absolutely hate the person that you're critiquing and you hate their work and you think it's bad, treat them at least like a human being with a soul. Try to be kind. And if you're in a class situation where, it's time to be an adult and critique things based on that piece of artwork, try to put yourself in the shoes of the artist, at least, and offer them constructive criticism. That's the difference between, criticism just to be an ass and criticism to actually help an individual grow. Sorry about that little bit of a jump cut there. My camera had full memory, so I had to unload some stuff and start from scratch. So, what I was about to say, I believe, was criticism is intended to, it's to help you, and a lot of people come from a place where, they're criticizing your work to help you better yourself, not to pick you apart or bring you down, make you feel bad about your work. Granted, there are going to be people who are going to nitpick things to make themselves feel or look better. Some people do come from a place of malice, but for the most part, your peers, people that you trust, people that you like, they're going to be doing it to better your work. And it's a little bit of tough love. And some people are just not good at it. Like, if you attend college and you find yourself struggling to critique other people, or struggling to take critique from other people, it's not easy. I think, it's very hard to give good critiques. It's hard to take critique. You get better at it the more you do it. It's definitely something that I wish high schools included in their art class curriculums more than they do, at least more than they did where I went to high school, because they didn't really, it really was absent almost completely from any of our classes. It definitely wasn't a part of every assignment like it is in college, or at least at my college. Pretty much every assignment was critiqued, and that was like a guaranteed part of the experience. And I think that's a good thing. In case you're wondering, I did jump to the first part of inking, which is going to be with this Bic pen. I really like these pens. They're, you know, your most generic pen that you can possibly imagine. It's just a ballpoint black pen, basically. It's, you know, office grade, basically. I did a couple little test swirlies on the edges. All of this part of the picture does get pretty much edited and cleaned out in post-production. So that won't be there, but these pens, I do find them to not blob, and what I mean by that is like every once in a while a pen will kind of puke out a little bit of ink that it shouldn't have, and that will make a little bump mark or something on your line, and I really can't handle that kind of stuff, so I gravitate towards pens that I know are very predictable. And I find Bic pens to be very predictable. And, you know, you have to work on a line a little bit, but I think it can make really nice line work, especially if you're not being too snobby about your materials. Of course, there are other pens out there that are leaps and bounds better than a Bic pen, but if you are on a budget, or if that's not something that bothers you, totally just buy whatever pen. You can use whatever pen you can find, and I think you just kind of get comfortable with what you find and you start using. And in my case, I've been using Bic pens for many, many, many years, so I am comfortable with using them in a way that looks decent. I will get into materials on a later date. I'm not really too 100% happy with my commentary on critique that I just did. I feel like there's a lot more I could have said, and I just kind of talked in circles a couple times. But I hope that it was at least somewhat informative. If you guys have any questions about critique specifically, or if you are somebody who's potentially going to have critiques in their future, if you're planning to go to an art college, if your art school or your high school art classes do critique and you're nervous about it, or if you have any questions about giving critiques or taking critiques, feel free to send them to me or to ask in the comments or whatever. A little bit about any of your worries about the process of critiquing. It's a very stressful thing for people, especially when you haven't done it a lot. Portfolio review type stuff is also kind of like a critique. If you guys are going into art college, you'll know all about portfolio reviews and portfolios and all that jazz. Not my favorite, not my favorite thing. But if you guys do want to hear about portfolios, I can talk about those as well, because I've definitely had my fair share of portfolio experience, both as somebody who, you know, I had to have gotten into college with a portfolio at some point, because I did that whole thing, and you make a lot of portfolios while you're in college, and being an illustrator, especially if you do plan on being a freelancer, you're gonna be making even more portfolios, and your whole life's just gonna be portfolios. I, you know, don't care for them, but I totally understand why they exist and their purpose. So I can talk about those more in the future, and I probably will. So I'll probably talk about critiques a little bit more in the next video, and then I'm going to jump to another topic. So again, if you guys have any questions about anything that I've talked about in this series so far, please leave them in the comment section, and I will try to touch upon any question that you guys bring up within like the next video or two. I'll probably finish this up because I know that the last video was about 20 minutes long. This one's gotten to be about 7.5, so this is probably going to be my longest video actually. And I feel like I talked about the least amount of important things. So hopefully this has been helpful to you to some degree, and I'm definitely going to like keep working on this project. It'll pick up again in part 5. I'll continue inking. It's still got a long way to go. I know that this last video, the beginning of it, it really just seemed like I was touching things up and not a lot of big fancy changes started happening. Now it's kind of more, you know, launching off into a whole new phase. For part 5, there'll be a little bit more going on visually. So hopefully you guys tune into that. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one. Bye-bye.